Often, when we discuss the strength or weakness of a game series, we use one primary metric to judge whether those games are successes or failures: the sales of the title. Now, undoubtedly, game sales are really important because ultimately the money in the bank is what is going to determine Nintendo's profitability going forward. All that said, Nintendo is a large and diversified company. Not every game needs to simply max out on sales numbers to have some kind of utility for them. And while they definitely want those big headline games, the Mario Karts and the Animal Crossings, to sell, 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 I wanted in this video to consider some of the other metrics by which Nintendo might be assessing the value of the titles in their lineup. These are what are often called the KPIs, or Key Performance Indicators. In the past, Nintendo has on occasion commented on the KPIs it uses to assess various different projects. For example, in a 2018 Q&A, Furukawa commented, "Hardware sell-through, volume sales by retailers to consumers, remains very important as a key performance indicator for our company, but I think that the number of hardware units in active use is an equally important KPI. The number of active users for each game application is another critical KPI for our mobile business, not just for the dedicated video game platform business, and we regularly track the numbers for both. The reason why these numbers in active use are important is because consumers who continue to play with the hardware have more opportunities to purchase subsequent software. To keep consumers using the hardware, we must first and foremost continue to release new software, and we also need to provide ways such as add-on content so that consumers can play one title for a longer time." End quote. Now, to some degree, there is likely a correlation between length of time played and the top-selling games. Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom are huge titles, while Super Smash Bros. Ultimate and Mario Kart will have some players coming back extremely regularly due to the online sessions. This is where titles like the Mario sports games may be able to prove themselves even if the initial sales are relatively low. After all, if there becomes a decent community of, let's say, Mario Strikers League players, or if people play Mario Tennis a lot in local multiplayer, these titles may actually end up having far more legs than it at first appears. If a game has very large medium playtimes, then it suggests that there's the potential to charge more for it going forward, the ability to sell ancillary merchandise off the back of it, and indeed it may suggest that it would benefit from an additional sales push. Now, that's not to say that there's no utility for them from games which drive consumers to play intensively for short periods, but perhaps not consistently. A Mario or Metroid game, say, where people might put in 20, 30, 40 hours and then play something else. Furukawa discussed this in February 2023, saying, "We believe that users' playtime differs depending on the characteristics of the software. Nintendo's titles include various types of games, ranging from those that are played for a comparatively long time and played continuously over a long period, to games that a player concentrates on for a certain number of hours until it is completed, at which point they move on to the next title. We believe that this vast variety is one of the appeals of the Nintendo Switch platform. For software that is not run as a service, there is a trend of greatly increased playtime immediately after release, followed by decreased playtime as people complete the title. But this has the advantage of making it easier for consumers to pick up the next title. Consumers who play a few titles for short periods of time are also very important to us, which is why we use annual playing users rather than playtime as our key performance indicator. For long-term growth of the overall platform, we do not think all Nintendo Switch systems being constantly active is strictly necessary, but we would like to increase playtime in accordance with the characteristics of the software." End quote. What's kind of fun here is that it shows that their assessment of their game's success is nuanced enough to account for the fact that different games will appeal in different ways. A short but hugely engaging title may be in some respects just as valuable as a long-term, cozy appointment game. Now, while Furukawa talks about the KPI for the company as a whole being players logged in, I still think they will consider playtime for individual titles when assessing those. Still, there are other metrics to consider as well. Another metric Nintendo have taken to using in recent years is what they call sales per hardware unit, which is slightly different from the software attach rate in a way that flatters, particularly I would suspect, Fire Emblem and Xenoblade. Let's look at this explainer from a past investor presentation to see how this metric operates. Furukawa explains, one conventional metric used in the dedicated platform business is the tie ratio, or the attach rate of software per unit of hardware. This is calculated by dividing the number of software units sold by the number of hardware units sold. However, with the rise in digital sales, we are witnessing the rapid sales growth of indie titles at a wide range of price points and add-on content sales that cannot be counted with the number of software units sold. As a result, software attach rate calculated using the conventional methods no longer adequately reflects the actual state of our business. Instead, we would like to look at sales per hardware unit, which is the overall sales for the platform divided by sales of the hardware itself. Note that this is calculated based on sales recognized by the company, and it differs from individual consumer spending. End quotes. This is where I imagine titles like Fire Emblem and Xenoblade especially would outperform their raw numbers, because the DLC released for these games, by all accounts, does appear to sell. At least they keep making it. It's not that the core games themselves are enormously high selling, but it's easy to imagine a strong conversion rate for extras from these more committed players. DLC for Super Smash Bros. Ultimate was one example in 2019 of how engagement with that game was maintained, and Furukawa also confirmed that Tetris 99 was driving uptake of Nintendo Switch Online as well. Another question that Nintendo frequently asks in questionnaires is how many people in your household play, and here variety is king. As they say, they want to encourage more people of varied demographics to play, and so naturally the more diverse their console offering, the more choices and more chances there are to attract people to Nintendo who might previously not have paid the console much heed. Whether this is playing Hanafuda on Clubhouse Games or ogling at Fury Green in Metroid Prime 4, you can imagine different experiences appealing within a family. Now, this is something that's difficult to fully gauge purely from metrics. They need questionnaires to judge this, and it may not be fully apparent. But it's evidently something they think is valuable. It's kind of the key aspect of game chat, that you can pop over and see someone's screen if there's something of interest, even when you're playing in parallel. So I think as time goes by, Nintendo will become ever more able to identify this themselves without having to rely on questionnaire data. Finally, one key indicator that frequently appears in their financial reports is the proportion of sales that take place outside Japan. While Nintendo want a strong base in their home country, market penetration abroad is likely to be an indicator of success, because after all, the rest of the world is a big place, and so the potential is significant. How this would translate to individual games? Well, I suspect those titles with a strong bias for sales outside the Japanese region, Mario Strikers Punch-Out!, Advance Wars, and Metroid Prime, may be able to justify their places on Nintendo's development schedule if they are perceived to help drive this internationalizing effort. Now, clearly, I've only just scratched the surface here. The female and senior demographics have been major focuses in the past, while Kit and Krista reported that children were a big push as they were leaving the company in the early 2020s. And of course, they do have the data for this in terms of the people logging into Switch and their unique user account details. I also suspect that Nintendo value games which begin longer play sessions. People boot up a quick game of Mario Kart, and then when they're there, notice another game they'd like to play and start playing that. With the sheer volume of data Nintendo has, I'm sure there is a lot more that they are able to infer about people's play experiences, and I go into that in another video, which I'll be linking at the end. At any rate, that's it for this video, so thanks as ever for watching. If you like, comment, subscribe, check out the Patreon, I'd massively appreciate it, but if not, I'm just so happy you're here, and I'll see you next time for another Nintendo Forecast.